Hello, welcome again to our Thursday sporting chat. Thanks ever so much for all the very kind comments you made about the show we did with Gary Monk a week ago. Gary gave a lot to that programme, and I like to think, Owls fans, that you saw your manager in a different light. He was able to convey some of his inner self and explain a bit more about his plans for Sheffield Wednesday. You won't be surprised that we've got more of a Blades leaning on the show this week. Not that Sheffield Wednesday haven't got a big game at Birmingham this weekend, but dare I say, Sheffield United have got a bigger one. Perhaps they won't face a bigger game this season than the home meeting with Fulham on Sunday. Well, to discuss that, our old friend, Kevin Gage, less of the old. It's great of you to join us, Kevin, former Blades star, of course, and a very well-respected pundit these days as well. And I'm delighted to say that we can broaden the discussion to non-league football, because there's been a tremendous resurgence of interest in that. Everywhere you look, crowds are far, far bigger than they have been historically. And I'm delighted to welcome a debut on the show, Richard Sheldon from Sheffield FC, who's the general manager of the oldest football club in the world. Richard, you, first of all, it was going to be Richard Timms, but he's kind of delegated you. But it's a good time to be delegated, really, when you look at the fact that you're the only source of football with crowds at the moment, and big ones at that. You must be reveling in that.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic start in terms of numbers. It was wondering how it was going to go, obviously, with COVID coming in. You were wondering whether people would be risking coming out, what the effects are on people's attitude to leisure activities, but sporting activities. And yeah, first two games have been a sellout, which is really good, really positive. We tend to average around 300 per game for the first team anyway. So we've got a fairly sizable support for our level. But yeah, we've obviously got a cap of 400, and the first two have been sellouts, which is great. So really positive for sure.
Indeed it is. And Kevin, if non-league football can safely accommodate supporters again, for goodness sake, why can't the pro game? Or be allowed to?
Well, it can, can't it? I mean, there's no two ways about it. I mean, Richards there has proved that it can be done at a lower level with lower amounts of fans, but obviously with a big capacity stadium like the two Sheffield clubs and Chesterfield and other clubs like that, of course it can accommodate fans. And not only can it accommodate fans at a certain percentage, but those fans who would go to the game would be so pleased to go to the game. They would adhere to every single regulation and rule that anybody could dream up. So there would be no issue with crowding or people just chanting or maybe singing or doing it with the normal things that fans do. If we had to sit there and and just do it in virtual silence, I think a lot of us would. But just get us back there soon.
Do you think the animal has been maligned and badly misjudged? The animal being the football supporter that certain people in government think cannot be trusted? We know better, I think.
I think we're an easy target, aren't we? I can fully understand a couple of months ago when perhaps at the start of the season, when you don't want 30,000 football fans streaming to a ground and packing the pubs, etc., etc. But they're trying to make the excuse that there'd be too much travelling to the game, too many crowds travelling to the game, and they would go in the pubs, which is a complete nonsense now because the pubs are so well regulated. And obviously with the new regulations in the Tier 2 in Sheffield, you can't even virtually go in the pub with your mates. So it's completely out the window. So, of course, what we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, me and you, Alan, but now the regulations have changed, and I don't even think it's possible anyway. So in many ways, the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago is a pointless conversation now with the new tier levels brought in. So it just gets more ridiculous by the day, literally by the day,
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, we're going to talk about what is a huge game for Sheffield United this weekend. That word is much overused, and I don't use it lightly. Every game is a huge game these days, but look, no points from 4 games, home to Fulham for the Blades. I think that qualifies for that tag. What do you say?
Oh, massively so. Yeah, hugely so. It was always going to be a key game for us anyway, because when you look at our first 8 fixtures or so, you look to the game against Leeds and the game against Villa, and certainly the Fulham game, and you're thinking, well, we're going to get some points there. We need to pick up points there. But obviously, having the start we've had, I mean, it's just common sense that we need a win, but we need something out of that game, certainly. But looking at the bigger picture, you're looking at your home games and the likes of West Brom and Fulham and Burnley and Brighton and teams like that, we need to be picking up points throughout the season against these games. So every game that you don't get decent results against those type of teams, let's call it the bottom third, the lower third, you're on the downward slope already, aren't you? You're playing catch up.
Yeah, you mentioned the big picture. Project Big Picture will occur in our discussions as we go along, and more detail on the Blades and Chris Wilder's preparations for this game. But just referring again to football fans as a breed and the kind of atmosphere that we miss. Richard Sheldon, if you go to a non-league game, as I often do, and really, really enjoy it, you kind of get the buzz of being in a crowd again, but you get a different, perhaps a purer atmosphere, in that there's no hostility, none of the hostility that can creep in at pro level.
That's right. It's the game which we all love, but packaged in a different way for sure. Total different experience to when you go and watch games in the EFL or the Premiership. Trying to come up with a reason to why. I think it's a case of obviously probably the way non-league football's been going over the years. Probably the emphasis on the games, whether it's a numbers or volumes thing, not sure. But certainly in my experiences going to non-league, I'm a Middlesbrough fan for my sins, and I used to go and watch the Borough every weekend near enough. Just for distance-wise, living in this area, kind of knocked it on the head. But getting involved with non-league and going to games, I don't think I could go back to watching the higher leagues as much as I was doing. I much prefer to go and watch non-league, whether it is Sheffield FC or anyone, just for that experience you get. Never any trouble. Everyone tends to speak to everyone, talk about the game, just the whole environment and the clubs and the people you meet who volunteer or work for the clubs. It's just really friendly, bit more down to earth, and you're that close to the pitch, you can feel it, you feel you're part of the club. And I think that's possibly what's lost at the top now is that, not in all cases, but as a whole, you don't feel as part of it as much you do at non-league level.
Kevin Gage, be interested in your views on that, because you grew up in the formative years were with a high-achieving, if you like, community club in Wimbledon. I know that you live in Dronfield, so you'll have noticed the number of cars that are parked around the Coach and Horses ground when Sheffield are at home these days.
Yeah, it's great to see. It really was great to see. I mean, I've been down to Sheffield FC, quite a few times over the years, obviously to watch games, usually pre-season games. But that's a really refreshing view from Richard there. That is great to hear about, and I think that's always been the case. That's not a new phenomenon. I think non-league football has always kind of been like that. And you mentioned Wimbledon, yeah. I mean, when I joined Wimbledon straight from school at 16, they'd literally just come into the league 2 seasons before in 1978. So it was a kind of non-league setup and a non-league ground. And that remained the same for about 6-7 years, actually. Obviously, they've come through the leagues now. So I did grow up in that kind of all in it together community atmosphere that I can, that Richard's talking about. I can appreciate that. And yeah, it's great to see Sheffield FC doing well. And there is 2 sides to the coin, isn't there? We're fortunate that Sheffield United are in the Premiership at the moment. And we're all loving being in the Premiership and mixing with the likes and beating the likes of Chelsea and Man United and all the rest of them. But, if let's not tempt fate, and we are in the Premiership. But if we had to go down to the Championship or even League One in a few years' time, we had a fantastic time in League One, and we spent a lot of times in League One and had some good games and had some good seasons. And similarly in the Championship for decades. It doesn't matter what level you play, the commitment to the club and your enjoyment of the matches and the match day experience is the same, whether you're playing in the Championship or the Premiership or League One or in non-league. It's all about mixing with your mates and going for a drink and talking about the game and enjoying what you're seeing on the pitch.
And as for the way the game is played, I mean, I attend non-league games regularly for pleasure, not for work, purely for pleasure. It's an attacking game of football, but what I particularly like about it is that it's played mostly for enjoyment by the players, and you get none of the nonsense that you see, which embarrasses those of us who watch it and should far more acutely embarrass those who perpetrate it and roll around and feign injury. And all of that is so refreshing, Kevin, not to see any of that.
Yeah, we all totally agree with what you're saying, and every single football fan is in utter agreement with that, I would imagine. That's crept into the game, hasn't it, in the last 10, 15, and maybe 20 years, I don't know the reason why, but it is an embarrassment. And yeah, you're quite right. It's like full-blooded, a bit more of a proper game of football, a bit more of a, shall I use the phrase, man's game. When you get into non-league, it's a bit more rough and ready. But there's nothing wrong with that at all, is there? It's all part of the game. And our sanitised Premier League game, where every single time someone goes up for a header, there's a foul, or someone gets pushed over, or there's a bit of play acting, or if there's a leg in the penalty area, you can bet your life a forward would deliberately trip over it. That's all part of the dumbing down of the game in the Premier League. Yeah.
And I was watching Hallam last Saturday, in a very good game, and they left three players up constantly. Every time they were defending a corner, they left three attacking players on the halfway line, which is something you just note almost unheard of, really, which is kind of great to see. But just before we go back to Richard on this point, Kevin, there's been a debate among us. We're talking about the purity of players' reactions, the non-cheating that you see among non-league players. It's fair to say, I think, that Sheffield United under Chris Wilder practiced that at the very top of the game and possibly suffer from it from time to time. And there is an argument, well, should they be cuter? Should they actually, if you can't beat them, join them? What do you say to that? Be sad, wouldn't it?
It would be sad. And as a Sheffield United fan, watching the game against Arsenal at the Emirates, I was fortunate to be invited down to do the co-commentary. And there was an incident in the second half where John Lundstrom was in the penalty area on the right-hand side. And he actually clipped the ball past the defender, who hung out a leg. And I put my hands in the air and I had to cover my mouth because I'm on radio, and I wanted to scream, "Go down, penalty." I wanted him to fall over because it was ripe for him to clip the guy's leg, and I'm certainly would have got a penalty. But he rode the challenge, and the attack came to nothing. So yeah, from what you've just said, if he had been a bit cuter and dived, let's make no bones about it, if he dived, he would have won a penalty, I'm absolutely sure. It would have gone to VAR, and then it's in the lap of the gods, of course. But you've seen them given, let's put it like that. So to answer your question, if we're going to stay in the Premiership and the way the game's going at the top level, then unfortunately we're going to have to get cuter, and we're going to have to play a bit more gamesmanship and try to be a little bit more, I'm going to say dishonest, which is a horrible thing to say, but you get my drift, don't you? Which goes against everything that I believe in and I was brought up to believe in, with the old Wimbledon side, and then playing for Graham Taylor, who was very, very of a similar ilk. You stood up for challenges, you didn't cheat, you didn't throw yourself on the floor, etc., etc. And then obviously Bassett coming through, and Chris Wilder is a disciple of the Dave Bassett, not methodology, but the mantra and the way he conducts himself. So yeah, it goes against everything that we believe in, but unfortunately, that's the way that it's going at the top level. And I would agree with you. We do have to get cuter, I think is the right word. More streetwise, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether Chris Wilder agrees or is going to change his philosophy as a result of it. I detected recently he's not, because he's proud, and rightly so, of maintaining the philosophy he has. So it'd be really, really interesting to see how that develops, because I'm not sure that there's the psychology in the Sheffield United players in their makeup to actually carry that out.
I would totally agree with that. I can't see anybody who's going to throw himself to the floor and, arms flailing, and when they have the chance to ride a tackle and to keep going. It's an unnatural reaction. It would be an unnatural reaction for me to, as if I'm trying to get past somebody, dribbling past someone, to throw myself to the floor when I know that I could ride that tackle, stay on my feet, and keep going. I don't quite know how it gets into people's makeup. But obviously, over a period of time, maybe it does. Maybe you just get conditioned to, as I say, throwing your arms up and screaming foul. And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. But we need to find an answer, because we're too honest for our own good at times, to be honest, as Sheffield United players.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting debate. Richard, just turning to you again. I mean, nobody wants to profit from a situation like this that we're all suffering from. But ironically, non-league football is it a product of people wanting to get out and see matches, or did the resurgence, and I think it did, start before this pandemic struck?
Yeah, I'd say it started before. I think one of the key things is just the awareness of non-league. Football fans, when you're so used, I mean, even myself as a kid, the Premier League was in flow. It was, hard as a kid or even a young adult to try and find out about non-league, certainly back in the 90s. Now we've got social media, we've got many different channels where, your local non-league sides are becoming, people are becoming more aware of them. And I think all them areas put together, non-league, obviously it's never to the potential of what it should be, but yeah, more and more people are getting aware of it. Ground hopping's becoming far more popular. Even been the world's oldest club, and there's still people who don't even know we exist in and around the areas of Sheffield, let alone the world. So all that put together, I think it certainly was becoming more popular. After the pandemic, I think it gives it opportunity to even be the experience of coming to a non-league game, giving that more exposure. Obviously, we've hit 2 400s, which max capacity. Don't get me wrong, there's probably a fairly chunkable percentage of that number which are Sheffield United fans, Sheffield Wednesday fans can't get to a game. We always did well. If Sheffield United were away, we'd always pick up fans coming to watch us. But perhaps now that percentage is higher. And certainly I don't think it'll ever be a risk to Sheffield United in terms of these fans never going back to watch United, but certainly it's giving us an opportunity to earn a little bit more money over the gate and introduce people to the experience. I know certainly from the first 2 games there has been spectators coming to watch who've not experienced non-league before, whether it be messages on social media or emails coming in. It's been really positive, and what they've obviously experienced while there, for sure.
Yeah, very, very healthy and great to hear. And in part 2, we'll reflect more on the non-league games, some of the results that they've been, the high-scoring games they've been lately. We've got a couple of video clips as well, which Hallam FC fans might like to see from their midweek game. But let's close part 1 by looking more closely at Sheffield United against Fulham. It will be, presumably, the debut of Sheffield United's latest record signing, Rhian Brewster, something like £23 million from Liverpool. I mean, the word pressure gets bandied around all the time with big money players, but he couldn't have been coming into a bigger game, really, Kevin, than this, could he?
Well, not really, no. I mean, I think it's a bit unfair to put that pressure on him, because everybody thinks he's going to be our saviour. you know, and he's 20, 21 years old. I don't think he's played a Premiership minute, has he? He's had a loan spell at Swansea and did very, very well. So, yeah, it's a bit unfair. But, I mean, desperate times call for desperate measures. And I think he will be, I'm not going to use the word thrown in, because that's wrong. But I think he's had a good period of settling in, because there's been an international break and he didn't go away with his under-21 team, the England 21 team. So I think that's helped us big style. Now, whether that was his decision or whether Chris kind of lent on him a bit, I don't know the ins and outs of it. But he will have had a full 2 weeks bedding in period to get used to Sheffield United and to settle down a bit, which will be worth its weight in gold, hopefully. So I expect him to play for sure, yeah. And looking at his clips on YouTube, and I don't know too much about him, I have to be honest. I've just seen what I've seen on various bits and bobs, but he does look a top quality player, and his track record, certainly in his England career, he's obviously a superb footballer. He's got a great technical player. I've seen the goals he scored for Swansea as well. I've seen all of those, and he scores all types of goals. He's not afraid to take a long range shot. He gets right foot one-touch finishes, left foot one-touch finishes. He's in and around the box, so I think he's got a bit of everything. He's a bit of a Billy Sharp poacher, but he also operates very, very well in general build-up play as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him play, and I think he gives us something that we haven't currently got in this side.
Yeah. Any thoughts or theories as to what the makeup might be of the strike partnership, assuming that Brewster starts? That may not be the case, but any thoughts as to who his ideal partner might be, or is it pretty experimental, do you think? Yeah.
I think experimental is the word at the moment, because no one really up front has shone at the moment. Ollie McBurney hasn't really hit any great heights this season. Hasn't got going. Yeah, out of everybody, I would expect what looks like a good pairing on paper would be McBurney and Brewster. You've got someone obviously with a bit more physical presence, and then you've got Brewster to work off around him. But as we say, you know, McBurney hasn't done fantastically well this season. So who do you play alongside Brewster, assuming Brewster will play? You could make a case for McGoldrick, who never lets us down and would get hold of the ball and try and do that creative kind of number 10-ish role, leaving Brewster to play off lone furrow up front. But is that a bit too much for a 21-year-old kid? It was his first season in the Premiership. So does he need a strike partner right up alongside him to help him out a bit, which I think is probably the way to go. So we've got Oliver Burke, but he seems to be a very similar player to Brewster. He's a similar size and shape, and he gets down channels and is more of a runner, I think, than a pure footballer. So are they too similar to play together? I don't know. Chris will have his own ideas, and obviously he hasn't just brought Brewster to sit on the bench or anything. I don't think he's going to be an impact player like Moussa. I think we're looking at Brewster to play 3/4 of the games this season. Hopefully he'll stay fit and get his goals and be one of our main strike players up front there.
Yeah, you would indeed have thought so, but who knows what Chris Wilder will do? Very unpredictable. I remember an illustrious former manager that Chris played for would often sleep on it. He'd tell us what the team was on a Friday, and he might even tell the team what the team was. You come to the game on Saturday, he's made a couple of changes. Dave Bassett used to do that all the time.
Yeah, you used to call it a gut feeling.
Yeah,
you used to get a gut feeling. Usually, in my younger days at Wimbledon, I was the recipient of it, and usually the gut feeling was, I'm going to leave you out this week, Gage, and put you on the bench. So I went, oh, cheers, Harry. Any reason for that? No, I've just got a gut feeling.
Great stuff. I think we've all got gut feelings at the moment. We've all got guts, some of us anyway. Let's close part one on that note. Let's not pursue that. In part two, James Gregg will join us. Richard Sheldon from Sheffield FC, Kevin Gage explained, will be with us as well as we round up the area, but talk more about football, the future of football, and in particular, project. What is it called now? Is it the Big Window or something? The Big Picture. The big picture, project big picture. Let's go to a break. Join us in a couple of minutes. See you then.